The Harmony dropped out of hyperspace directly between two massive battle fleets that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. On one side, 10,000 Caltharian warships hung in formation like a storm cloud made of metal and fire on. The other side, 8,000 Epsilon collective vessels arranged themselves in perfect geometric patterns that looked like deadly snowflakes. Commander Jiwoo Park stood on the bridge of her tiny ship and looked at the wall of weapons pointed at them from both directions. Each fleet had enough firepower to destroy entire star systems, but right now all those weapons were aimed at each other, with the Harmony floating helplessly in the middle. This is Commander Jiwoo Park of the Human Diplomatic Corps. She broadcast on all frequencies. I am placing this ship between your fleets. If you want to start a war, you will have to go through us first. The response was immediate and chaotic. Both fleets began transmitting at once, demanding to know how humans had broken their silence. The communication channels filled with angry voices speaking in dozens of different languages. Admiral Vextal of the Caltharian Third Fleet was the first to establish a clear communication link. His massive face appeared on the main screen and his eyes burned with fury. Where have your people been, human? Do you know what chaos you have caused? The Epsilon machines have dishonored us while you were silent. Before Jiwoo could respond, another screen activated, showing the pale blue face of Epsilon Collective Prime Calculator Zenth. The mathematical precision of his words cut through the air like a blade. Human mediator, your absence has created logical paradoxes in all negotiation matrices. The Caltharian biologicals have made emotional decisions that threaten galactic stability. Commander Jiwoo looked at both alien leaders and saw something that gave her hope. Despite their anger and fear, both commanders were talking to her instead of shooting at each other. The human reputation for diplomacy was so strong that even in the middle of a war crisis, they were willing to listen. We know what our absence has caused, she said calmly, and we are here to fix it, but first you need to stand down your weapons. Both of youth Caltharian Admiral laughed bitterly. Stand down, you ask us to show weakness before the machines. They have moved their fleets into our sacred territories. They have dishonored our ancestors. Prime Calculator Zenth responded with mathematical precision. The Caltharian statement contains 17 logical fallacies. Our positioning was defensive in nature. Their emotional interpretation of our actions is not based on factual analysis. Dr. Minho Lee stepped forward. Commander, both species are operating under fundamental misunderstandings. The Caltharians interpret Epsilon Collective mathematical communications as cold insults. The Epsilon Collective interprets Caltharian emotional expressions as irrational threats. Lieutenant Sora Nam was monitoring both fleets. Commander, I am detecting that weapons are still charging on both sides, but the rate of charge has slowed. Both commanders are curious about our presence. Communications Officer Hyun Kim was managing translation protocols. Commander, I am establishing universal translation matrices for both fleets. Many of the hostile communications have been caused by translation errors. What followed was the most intense diplomatic session in galactic history for 18 hours. Commander Jiwoo and her crew worked without rest to prevent two civilizations from destroying each other. They used every technique that human diplomats had developed over centuries of galactic mediation. Dr. Minho provided cultural context, explaining to the Caltharians that Epsilon Collective mathematical language was not meant to be insulting, but was simply their way of expressing precision and logic. He explained to the Epsilon Collective that Caltharian emotional expressions were not signs of mental instability, but were their way of showing respect and honor. Engineer Daeho used his technical knowledge to help both fleets understand each other's ship movements. He showed the Caltharians that Epsilon Collective formations were designed for maximum efficiency, not for intimidation. He showed the Epsilon Collective that Caltharian fleet displays were ceremonial honors, not aggressive posturing. Communications Officer Hyun worked tirelessly to establish clear communication protocols between the two fleets. She created translation matrices that could convert mathematical proofs into poetic language and war songs into logical statements. Lieutenant Sora used tactical analysis to demonstrate that both fleets had been responding to defensive movements from the other side. She showed that what each side had interpreted as aggressive positioning was actually cautious preparation for possible attack. Pilot Chaewon used her navigation skills to suggest new fleet positions that would allow both sides to maintain their honor while reducing the appearance of threat, but the most important work was done by Commander Jiwoo herself. She spent 18 hours talking to both commanders, helping them understand that their conflict was based on misunderstanding and fear rather than real aggression. Admiral Vextel, she said, speaking directly to the Caltharian commander, "Your people are warriors and poets. You understand the beauty of strength combined with wisdom. The Epsilon Collective are also warriors in their own way. They fight chaos and uncertainty with logic and precision." Prime Calculator Zenth, she said, turning to the Epsilon Collective leader, "Your people value efficiency and rational thought. The Caltharians also value these things, but they express them through emotion and tradition. Their passion is not weakness, it is a different kind of strength." Slowly, impossibly, the two fleets began to stand down weapons. The Caltharians recognized the poetry in Epsilon Collective mathematical precision. The Epsilon Collective saw the logical structure underlying Caltharian warrior philosophy. Both species realized they had been fighting over a misunderstanding that had been amplified by fear and the absence of human mediators. As the immediate crisis passed, news of the Harmony's intervention spread across the galaxy. Other species began attempting their own diplomatic solutions. The crystalline hegemony started experimenting with consensus building techniques they had learned from human diplomats. The hive worlds began developing new communication methods to bridge gaps with other species. The Peaceful Traders Guild established emergency mediation services using the techniques they had observed from human negotiators. The Andorian Republic created cultural exchange programs to build understanding between different species. Even the warrior species began to reconsider their aggressive responses. Some began using the human concept of honor bound truces. Others started adopting human ideas about proportional response instead of total war communications. Officer Hyon monitored the changing situation across the galaxy. Commander, I am detecting a significant decrease in hostile transmissions. Species that were preparing for war 6 hours ago are now attempting to negotiate. Dr. Minho was analyzing the broader implications. Commander, the galaxy is learning that peace is not just about having good mediators. Peace requires every species to take responsibility for maintaining relationships with their neighbors. As the crisis slowly resolved, the barriers around human worlds began to fluctuate. The observers had been watching everything, and their experiment had reached an unexpected conclusion. A new transmission came through the communication system. The test is complete. Humanity's value has been demonstrated. They will be returned to their proper place in galactic society. But Commander Jiwoo had one more message to send. She broadcast toward the coordinates where the observers were hidden. "We know you are listening. Humanity does not just hold the galaxy together through talking. We do it through action, through sacrifice, through standing between enemies and refusing to let them destroy each other." Commander Jiwoo Park gathered her crew around the main tactical table in the center of the bridge. The holographic display showed the galaxy burning with conflict as hundreds of species prepared for the greatest war in galactic history. "We cannot break through the barriers around human worlds," she said, looking each crew member in the eye, "but we can do something else. We can prove that humanity's value is not just in talking, but in taking action when words fail." Dr. Minho Lee was studying conflict probability charts on his tablet. "Commander, I have been analyzing the battle patterns. The civilizations with the highest chance of survival are the ones that have had the most contact with humans over the years. They have learned some of our diplomatic techniques, even if they cannot use them perfectly." Lieutenant Sora Nam nodded as she looked at tactical displays. "The Andorian Republic is still trying to negotiate with their neighbors. The Peaceful Traders Guild is attempting to maintain neutral zones. Even some of the warrior species are hesitating before attacking their traditional enemies. That gives us hope." Communications Officer Hyun Kim said, "The galaxy has not completely forgotten what humans taught them about cooperation. Some species are still trying to find peaceful solutions." Engineer Daeho Yoon looked up from his technical analysis. "Commander, I have been studying the observer technology. The energy barriers are incredibly powerful, but they have one weakness: the observers are so focused on studying large-scale civilizations that they are not paying attention to individual ships." Pilot Chaewon Shin was calculating hyperspace routes. "Commander, if we move fast enough, we can reach the conflict zones before the major fleets Engaged, we could position ourselves between the opposing force. Jiwoo felt a plan forming in her mind. It was dangerous and probably impossible, but it was the only chance they had. We are going to become the voice that humanity cannot be right now. We are going to show the galaxy that cooperation is still possible. The plan was audacious. The Harmony would travel to the most dangerous conflict zones and use their knowledge of human diplomatic techniques to prevent wars from starting. They would become living proof that the lessons humans had taught the galaxy were not forgotten. Dr. Minho pulled up cultural databases. Commander, I have detailed information about every major species in the galaxy. I know their languages, their customs, their fears, and their hopes. We can use this knowledge to find common ground between enemies. Lieutenant Sora activated the ship's communication systems. Commander 1 can establish quantum entangled communication links with multiple fleets simultaneously. We can create a three-way conversation between species that have never spoken directly to each other. Engineer Daeho was working on technical modifications. Commander, I can boost our communication array to reach across multiple star systems. We can become a mobile communication hub that connects different parts of the galaxy. Communications Officer Hyun was studying diplomatic protocols. Commander, I have memorized the negotiation techniques that human diplomats used for centuries. I know how to translate not just words but concepts and emotions between different species. Pilot Chaewon was plotting their course. Commander, the first target should be the Caltharian Epsilon collective border. Their fleets are the largest, and if they start fighting, it will trigger conflicts across the entire galaxy. Jewel looked at the tactical display showing the massive fleets moving toward each other. The Caltharian Empire had assembled over 10,000 warships for this conflict. The Epsilon collective had responded with their own fleet of geometric precision vessels. The two forces were like massive storms approaching each other, and when they met, the explosion would be visible from across the galaxy. But there was something else that gave Jiwoo hope. The fleets were moving slowly, as if both sides were reluctant to actually start fighting. Despite their anger and fear, both civilizations remembered the peace that had existed for 3 centuries. Set course for the Caltharian Epsilon border. Jiwoo ordered maximum speed. We have 6 hours before their fleets meet and 6 hours to prevent the galaxy from destroying itself. As the Harmony jumped to hyperspace, the crew worked frantically to prepare for the most important diplomatic mission in galactic history. Dr. Minho studied the cultural files of both species, looking for common ground. Lieutenant Sora configured the communication systems to handle multiple alien languages. Simultaneously, Engineer Daeho boosted the ship's power systems to maximum capacity. Communications Officer Hyun practiced the specific diplomatic phrases that had been used successfully in previous negotiations between the two species. Pilot Chaewon calculated the exact position where they would need to place their ship to be visible to both fleets. Commander Jiwoo studied the history of human diplomacy, looking for techniques that had worked in the past. Humans had always been successful as mediators because they were genuinely neutral. They had no ancient grudges against any species, and they could see conflicts from an outside perspective. But now the Harmony crew would have to do something even more difficult. They would have to convince 2 massive fleets to trust them. Even though they were just one small ship, they would have to speak with the authority of the entire human race. Even though they were the only humans left free in the galaxy, the ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the disputed border region, and immediately every sensor started screaming warnings. 2 enormous fleets were approaching from opposite directions, filling space with the largest gathering of warships in galactic history. Dr. Minho looked at the scanner readings. Commander, I am detecting over 20,000 ships total. Both fleets are fully armed and ready for battle. Energy weapons are charged, shields are raised, and fighter squadrons are launching. Lieutenant Sora was monitoring communication traffic. Commander, both fleets are exchanging threats and ultimatums. The Caltharian Admiral is reciting war poetry. The Epsilon Collective is sending mathematical proofs of their superiority. Engineer Daeho was studying the tactical situation. Commander, if these fleets engage each other, the battle will be visible from 50 light-years away. The energy release will disrupt subspace communications across 3 sectors. Communications Officer Hyun was listening to the increasingly hostile transmissions. Commander, both sides are demanding that the Other fleet withdraw, the Caltharians are calling the Epsilon. Collective soulless machines, the Epsilon. Collective is calling the Caltharians primitive savages. Pilot Chewan was calculating approach vectors. Commander, I can position us exactly between the two fleets, but once we are there, we will be in the crossfire of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. Zhu looked at her crew and saw determination in their eyes. These 5 people were about to attempt something that had never been done in galactic history. They were going to try to stop a war using nothing but words and courage. Take us in, Chewan, she ordered. Put us directly between the fleets. As the Harmony moved toward the space between the approaching armadas, Jiwoo felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. Billions of lives depended on what happened in the next few hours. The observers had wanted to test whether the galaxy could survive without human mediation. Now they were about to find out, but not in the way they had expected. 1 human ship and 6 human voices were about to determine the fate of galactic civilization. The test was about to become a lot more interesting. Dr. Minho Lee sat at his station with his hands shaking as he analyzed the transmission data. Commander, the signal is definitely coming from the exact coordinates where Kepler Station disappeared 50 years ago. But according to physics, that location should be empty space. Jiwoo walked over to the science station and looked at the readings. Show me everything we have about the Kepler incident, she said, even the files that are supposed to be destroyed. Minho pulled up classified documents that had been buried so deep in government archives that most people had forgotten they existed. The files painted a picture that was far more terrifying than the official story the crew of the Harmony read in silence as the truth about humanity's first contact with beings from outside the galaxy was revealed. Kepler Station had been sent to investigate strange energy readings beyond the galactic rim. Dr. Sarah Chun and her team of 50 scientists had been studying what they thought were natural phenomena, but what they found was something that changed everything they thought they knew about the universe. The observers were not aliens in the traditional sense. They were beings that existed in dimensions beyond normal space and time. They had been studying the development of intelligent life in the galaxy for millions of years, watching civilizations rise and fall like scientists watching bacteria in a petri dish. According to the classified reports, the observers had been particularly interested in humans because humans had done something that no other species in the galaxy had ever managed. They had become universal translators and mediators. They had learned to communicate with dozens of different species and help them understand each other. Lieutenant Sora Nam looked up from her tactical display. Commander, I have been analyzing the current conflict patterns. The civilizations that are fighting the hardest are the ones that have had the least contact with humans. The species that worked closely with human diplomats are still trying to negotiate even without us. Communications Officer Hyun Kim turned around in her chair. Commander, I am monitoring transmissions from the Galactic Council. The representatives are trying to continue meeting, but they cannot understand each other without human translators. Some species are using gesture languages, others are trying to communicate through mathematics. A few are even attempting to sing their messages. Engineer Daeho Yoon was studying the energy barriers around human worlds. Commander, I have been analyzing the barrier technology. The energy patterns are incredibly sophisticated. They are not just blocking communications. They are also scanning everything that happens outside the barriers. The observers are collecting data on every conversation, every battle, every diplomatic attempt. Jiwoo realized the full scope of what was happening. The observers had identified humans as the key species that held galactic civilization together. Now they were conducting the ultimate experiment. They had removed humans from the equation to see if the galaxy could survive without them. But this was not just about survival, it was about evolution. The observers wanted to know if other species could learn to do what humans did naturally. Could they learn to be mediators and translators? Could they learn to build bridges between different cultures and ways of thinking? Pilot Chaewon Shin was monitoring long-range sensors. Commander, the situation is getting worse. The Caltharian Empire and the Epsilon Collective are moving their entire fleets toward each other. The crystalline hegemony has declared martial law. The hive worlds are preparing to attack anyone who comes near their borders. Dr. Minho pulled up strategic projections on the main screen. Commander, based on historical data, if these conflicts continue, we are looking at a galactic war that could destroy dozens of civilizations. The death toll could reach into the trillions. Drew studied the projections and felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. She understood now why the observers had chosen to study humans. The galaxy was like a massive machine with thousands of moving parts, and humans had become the oil that kept all the parts working together. Without that oil, the machine was tearing itself apart, but there was something else in the classified files that gave Jiwoo hope. The reports from Kepler Station had mentioned that the observers were not cruel or evil. They were simply scientists trying to understand how intelligence developed in the universe. They had rules about their experiments, and they did not allow entire civilizations to be destroyed unless it was absolutely necessary. The question was whether the current experiment had gone too far. Commander Hyon said suddenly, "I am receiving another transmission from inside the barrier. Put it on the main speaker," Jiwoo ordered. The strange voice filled the bridge again. "The test continues," it said. "The galaxy burns as expected. Most species have reverted to their primitive behaviors. Some attempt communication but fail to understand each other. The mediator species remains silent as required." There was a pause, and then the voice continued, "But there is an anomaly. One ship of the mediator species remains outside the barriers. This ship attempts to interfere with the test. This is not permitted." Jiwoo felt her heart racing. The observers had noticed them. The Harmony was the only human ship still active in the galaxy, and their presence was affecting the experiment. The voice spoke again. "The anomaly will be corrected. The ship will be brought into the barrier or destroyed. The test must continue." Without interference, the transmission ended, and immediately alarms started going off all over the ship. Engineer Daeho looked at his instruments with panic in his eyes. "Commander, something is scanning us. The energy patterns are the same as the barriers around human worlds. They are trying to create a barrier around our ship." Lieutenant Sora activated the ship's defensive systems. "Commander, we are being targeted by some kind of energy weapon. I am reading massive power buildup, but the source is not visible on any of our sensors." Pilot Shaewon gripped the controls tightly. "Commander, if they create a barrier around us, we will be cut off from the galaxy just like every other human ship. We will not be able to help." Onyeju made a decision that would change everything. "Chaewon, get us out of here. Maximum speed toward the conflict zones. We are not going to let them silence USAs." The Harmony jumped to hyperspace. The crew could see energy beams trying to catch them. The observers were attempting to trap them in the same kind of barrier that surrounded human worlds. But the ship was fast, and the crew was determined. Dr. Minho was studying the data they had collected. "Commander, I think I understand what the observers are really testing. They want to know if other species can evolve beyond their current limitations. They want to see if the galaxy can learn to cooperate without human mediation, but that means they are willing to let billions of beings die to find out." Sora Seijuwu nodded grimly. "The observers think of entire civilizations as experimental subjects. They do not see individual lives as important. They only care about the big picture, about the evolution of intelligence in the universe." Engineer Daeho was monitoring their escape route. "Commander, the observers are not following us, but I am detecting that the energy barriers around human worlds are getting stronger. They are making sure that no other humans can escape communications." Officer Hyan was trying to contact other human ships. "Commander, I cannot reach any other human vessels. They are all trapped inside the barriers. We are the only humans left free in the galaxy." Zhu realized that the Harmony and its crew of 6 people were now the only hope for preventing a galactic war that could destroy everything. The observers had trapped billions of humans behind energy barriers, and now they were watching to see if the galaxy would tear itself apart. The universe had become a laboratory, and the experiment was about to reach its most dangerous phase, but Jiwoo had no intention of letting the observers treat living beings like laboratory specimens. The crew of the Harmony would find a way to save the galaxy, even if it meant defying beings with technology beyond human comprehension. The test was about to become a lot more complicated than the observers had planned. The Harmony dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, and immediately every alarm on the ship started screaming. Engineer Daeho Yoon stared at his instruments with his mouth hanging open. "Commander, I am reading energy signatures. That should not exist. The readings are off the scale. Jiwoo rushed over to Daeho Station and looked at the display. The numbers were so high that the computer kept flashing error messages. What kind of energy signatures? She asked. I do not know, Daeho said, shaking his head. The patterns are unlike anything in our databases. It's like someone wrapped the entire solar system in a blanket made of pure energy through the main viewing screen. Earth looked perfectly normal. The blue and green planet hung in space exactly where it should be. The moon was in its proper orbit. The space stations and satellites were all in their correct positions. But the sensors were telling a completely different story. Dr. Minho ran scans on every frequency he could. Think of Commander, there's a barrier around Earth. The barrier extends past the moon's orbit and it is blocking all electromagnetic communications. Nothing is getting in or out. Pilot Chaewon Shin guided the ship closer to the mysterious barrier. As they approached, the energy readings became even stronger. Look at this, she said, pointing at her navigation display. The barrier is not blocking physical matter. We could fly right through it if we wanted to, but it is stopping all radio waves, all subspace communications, all quantum entangled transmissions communications. Officer Hyun Kim tried every communication method she knew. Commander, I am attempting to contact Earth on all frequencies. I am getting nothing back, not even static. The barrier is creating perfect silence. Lieutenant Sora Nam checked her tactical sensors. Commander, I am detecting similar energy signatures around every human colony, New Tokyo, New Seoul, the mining stations in the asteroid belt. They are all surrounded by the same type of barrier. Jiwoo felt a chill run down her spine. This was not an accident. Someone had deliberately placed these barriers around every human world at exactly the same time. The coordination required for such an operation was beyond anything she had ever imagined. Who could do something like this? She asked. Dr. Minho was running calculations on his tablet. Commander, the energy requirements for creating barriers around hundreds of worlds simultaneously would be enormous. We are talking about technology that is thousands of years ahead of anything humans have developed. Engineer Daeho was studying the barrier structure. Commander, the energy pattern is not random. It has a specific frequency and rhythm. It's almost like someone is using the barrier to send a message. What kind of message? Jiwoo asked before Daeho could answer. Communications officer. Hyun suddenly sat up straight in her chair. Commander, I am detecting a transmission. It is coming from inside the barrier around Earth, but the transmission is not human. Put it on the main speaker, Jiwoo ordered. The bridge filled with a sound unlike anything the crew had ever heard. It was not a voice in any traditional sense, but somehow they could understand the words that formed in their minds. The test has begun. The message said the chattering species has been silenced so that their true value can be measured. When the galaxy burns in the fires of misunderstanding, they will be allowed to speak again, but first the universe must learn what happens when the mediators are removed. The message ended and the bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at each other with wide eyes, trying to process what they had just heard. Dr. Minho was the first to speak. Commander, that transmission came from coordinates that matched the location of Kepler Station, but that is impossible. Kepler Station was destroyed 50 years ago. Jiwoo felt her blood turn to ice. Kepler Station had been humanity's first deep space research facility. It had been sent to explore the region beyond the galactic rim where strange energy readings had been detected. The station had vanished without a trace, and the official report had stated that it had been destroyed by exotic matter, but Jiwoo knew the truth because she had the highest security clearance in the human Space Force. The real reports about Kepler Station were classified at levels that most people did not even know existed. Hyun accessed the classified files on the Kepler incident. Jiwoo ordered authorization Alpha 77. The main screen filled with documents and video recordings that had been sealed. For 50 years, the crew watched in horror as the truth about Kepler Station was revealed. The station had not been destroyed. It had been taken by entities that existed outside normal space and time. The creatures called themselves observers, and they had been studying galactic civilizations for millions of years. They collected specimens and conducted experiments on entire species to understand how intelligent life developed. The last transmission from Kepler Station had been from Dr. Sarah Chun, the chief scientist. Her face had been pale with terror as she spoke into the camera. They are not hostile, she had said. They are scientists like us, but they study civilizations the way we study bacteria. They have been watching the galaxy for longer than we can. Imagine the video showed strange beings that seemed to be made of shifting energy and light they move through. The station like ghosts, touching equipment and examining the human crew with instruments that defied physics. They told us that humans are unique, Dr. Chun had continued. Other species fight or trade or explore, but humans do something different. Humans connect different species together. Humans build bridges between minds that would otherwise never understand each other. The final video log had been recorded as the station was being transported to an unknown location they are taking us to study. U.S. Dr. Chun had said they want to understand how humans became the glue that holds the galaxy together. They want to know if other species can learn to do what we do. Transmission had ended there, and Kepler Station had vanished. Lieutenant Sora was staring at the screen. Commander, if the observers have been studying us for 50 years, then they know exactly what our disappearance would do to the galaxy. Dr. Minho nodded grimly. They are not just studying humans anymore, they are studying the entire galactic civilization. They want to see what happens when the mediators are removed. They want to know if other species can learn to cooperate without human help. Engineer Deho looked at his instruments. Commander, the energy barriers around human worlds are not just blocking communications, they are protecting us from something. I think the observers know exactly what is going to happen in the galaxy, and they are keeping humans safe while they watch. Jiwoo stared at the barrier surrounding Earth. Understanding flooded through her mind like ice water. The observers were conducting the ultimate experiment. They had identified humans as the key species that held galactic civilization together, and now they were testing what would happen. If that key was removed, the galaxy was not just falling apart by accident. It was being deliberately torn apart to see if it could put itself back together without human help. And somewhere beyond the barrier, the observers were watching and taking notes while billions of beings prepared for the greatest war in galactic history. The universe had become a laboratory, and every living thing in it had become a test subject. Dr. Minho Lee burst through the bridge doors carrying 3 tablets and looking like he had not slept in days. Commander Park, you need to see this right now. The Caltharian Empire just officially declared war on the Epsilon Collective. The declaration came through 10 minutes ago. Jiwoo felt her stomach drop. The Caltharians and the Epsilon Collective had been at peace for over 300 years. Their last war had destroyed 17 star systems and killed billions of people on both sides. Human diplomats had worked for decades to build trust between the two civilizations. Show me the declaration, Jiwoo said. Minho activated the main screen, and the bridge filled with the sound of Caltharian war drums. The video showed Admiral Vextel standing in front of a massive fleet of warships. His armor was polished black and covered in the silver writing that told the story of his victories in battle. People of Caltharia, the Admiral said in his deep voice, the Silent Ones have abandoned us. The Epsilon machines have taken advantage of our trust. They have moved their fleets into our sacred territories. They have dishonored the memory of our ancestors. We will not stand for this insult. The video switched to show Epsilon Collective ships moving through space in perfect formation. The ships were white and smooth like giant pearls floating in the darkness. Their movements were so precise that they looked like they were dancing, but Jiwoo knew this was not a dance. This was preparation for war. The Epsilon Collective responded 30 minutes later, Minho said, switching to another video. A tall, thin being appeared on screen. Its skin was pale blue, and its eyes were large and completely black. When it spoke, its voice sounded like music. But the words were terrifying. Fellow members of the collective, it said, the biological entities called Caltharians have misinterpreted our defensive positioning as aggressive action. Their emotional responses have clouded their judgment. Without human mediators to explain our logical processes, they have chosen violence over reason. We must defend ourselves. Lieutenant Sora Nam looked up from her tactical display. Commander, I am tracking fleet movements across 12 sectors. The crystalline hegemony has activated their entire military. The hive worlds are sealing every border crossing. The Trader Guild is pulling all their ships back to home ports. Jiwoo walked over to Sora's station and looked at the tactical display the screen showed. A galaxy as a web of connected trade routes and communication lines. For 2 centuries, those lines had been maintained by human diplomats and merchants. Now, the web was breaking apart as species after species cut their connections to the outside. World, it's like watching a body die, Sora said quietly. Each species is like an organ, and the humans were the nervous system that kept everything working together. Now, the organs are shutting down one by one. Communications Officer Hyen Kim turned around. In her chair, Commander, I am receiving reports from across the galaxy. The Void Hunters have started raiding civilian transports. The Plasma Consortium is claiming ownership of neutral mining stations. 3 different species are fighting over the same trade route. In the Outer Remich report was worse than the last. Species that had been allies for generations were turning on each other. Trade agreements that had taken decades to negotiate were being abandoned overnight. Diplomatic missions were being recalled and embassies were being closed. The problem was that most alien species did not understand each other very well without human help. A Caltharian greeting that involved loud singing and weapon displays looked like a threat to peaceful species. Epsilon collective mathematical proof looked like coded insults to emotional species. A crystalline hegemony light pattern that meant friendship looked like a weapon targeting system to paranoid species. Humans had spent centuries learning these differences. They had trained diplomats who could speak dozens of languages and understand hundreds of cultures. They had built a system of universal translators and cultural guides that allowed different species to communicate safely, but now that system was gone, and the galaxy was remembering why they had been fighting each other for millions of years before humans arrived. Engineer Daeho Yoon came onto the bridge with his tools still in his hands. Commander, I have been monitoring communication traffic across all frequencies. The amount of hostile transmissions has increased by 400% in the last 6 hours. Most of it is species threatening each other or making demands that other species cannot understand. Pilot Chaewon Shin looked up from her navigation controls. Commander, we are still 18 hours away from Earth at maximum speed, but I am detecting massive energy signatures building up in 7 different sectors. Those look like pre-war preparations. You knew what pre-war preparations looked like. She had studied the Great War that happened before humans became galactic diplomats. Back then, the galaxy had been divided into dozens of competing empires that fought constantly. The war had lasted for 50 years and had destroyed entire civilizations. The only reason it had ended was because humans had arrived and convinced everyone to stop fighting. Humans had been new to space travel and had no history of conflict with any of the galactic powers. They had been neutral mediators who could talk to everyone without taking sides, but neutrality required trust and trust required communication. And right now, nobody could communicate with anybody else. Dr. Minho pulled up another display showing economic data. Commander, the galactic economy is collapsing. Trade volume is down 60%. Insurance companies are refusing to cover shipments through disputed territories. The universal credit system is failing because nobody trusts the guarantees anymore. The universal credit system had been one of humanity's greatest achievements. It allowed species with completely different economic systems to trade with each other. A species that used rare metals as currency could trade with a species that used energy crystals as currency because human banks guaranteed the exchange rates, but those guarantees were only as good as the trust that backed them up, and without human diplomats to maintain relationships between species, that trust was evaporating like water in vacuum. Hyen turned around again. Commander, I'm getting reports of actual fighting now. The Caltharian Third Fleet has engaged Epsilon collective patrol ships near the Nexus station. There are casualties on both sides. Jiwoo felt the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on her shoulders. She had always known that humans played an important role in galactic civilization, but she had never realized how important until now, without human voices to calm tensions and explain misunderstandings. The galaxy was falling apart in real time. The irony was that humans had become victims of their own success. They had been so good at preventing conflicts that other species had forgotten how to resolve disagreements on their own. They had become dependent on human mediation like a person becomes dependent on a medicine, and now the medicine was gone and the patient was dying. Set course for maximum speed toward Earth. Jiwoo ordered. We need to find out what happened to our people before this galaxy burns itself to ashes as the harmony jumped to faster than light speed. The crew could see through their sensors that the galaxy behind them was already beginning to burn. The first battles of what would become known as the Silent War had begun, and without human voices to call for peace, the fighting would only get worse. The universe had learned to depend on its Chattiest species to keep the peace. Now that the chattering had stopped, the silence was deafening and deadly. Commander Jiwoo Park stood in the middle of the bridge and stared at the giant screen in front of her. The screen showed hundreds of blinking lights, but something was very wrong. The lights that should have been blue were all red. Red meant danger. Red meant no signal. Red meant silence. The research ship Harmony had been flying through empty space for 3 days now. They were supposed to be getting messages from Earth every hour, but for 3 whole days nothing had come through, not one single word from home, not one voice from the billions of people who lived on human worlds. Jiwoo felt cold inside her chest. She had been in space for 20 years and had never seen anything like this. Humans were known across the galaxy for one thing. They never stopped talking. They talked so much that other alien species made jokes about it. The Caltharians called humans the chattering birds. The Epsilon Collective said humans could talk the stars out of the sky, but now the chattering birds had gone completely silent. Communications. Officer Hyeon Kim sat at her station with her hands shaking. She kept pressing buttons and turning dials, but nothing worked. The big communication array that connected them to the rest of the galaxy was working fine. It was picking up thousands of signals from alien worlds, but from human space there was nothing at all. Hyeon turned around in her chair and looked at Jiwoo with scared eyes. "Commander, we are getting emergency signals from everywhere. The Galactic Council is sending out panic messages. The Trade Federation is asking where all the humans went. Even the hive worlds are trying to contact us." Jiwoo walked over to Hyeon's station and looked at the messages scrolling across the screen. Each message was more desperate than the last. The Caltharian Empire wanted to know why their human ambassadors had stopped answering. The Epsilon Collective was demanding to know why trade negotiations had been abandoned. The crystalline hegemony was asking if humans had been attacked by enemies. Dr. Minho Lee ran onto the bridge carrying his tablet. His usually neat hair was messy and his eyes were wide with worry. "Commander, you need to see this right now. The galaxy is going crazy without us." Minho pressed some buttons on his tablet and the main screen changed. Now it showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of little dots representing different alien civilizations. Many of the dots were flashing red, which meant they were in conflict with each other. "Look at this," Minho said, pointing at different areas of the map. "The Caltharians and the Epsilon Collective are moving warships toward each other. The Trader Guild is refusing to honor contracts with anyone. The neutral zone has 3 different species claiming they own it now." Lieutenant Sora Nam looked up from her tactical station. Her face was white as paper. "Commander, it's much worse than that. I am detecting massive fleet movements in 7 different sectors. The crystalline hegemony is getting their entire navy ready for war. The hive worlds are closing all their borders and not letting anyone in or out." Jiwoo felt her heart beating fast in her chest. She had studied galactic history and knew what happened when the major powers started moving their fleets around. The last time this happened was 200 years ago, and it had led to the Great War that killed billions of people across dozens of worlds. The problem was that for the past 2 centuries humans had been the ones preventing wars like this. Humans were natural diplomats. They could talk to anyone and find common ground. They could translate not just languages but ideas and feelings. They had become the glue that held the galaxy together, and now that glue was gone, Hyeon turned around again and her voice was shaking. "Sir, the Galactic Council is dissolving. They cannot agree on anything without human translators. Each species thinks the others are threatening them. They are all speaking their own languages and nobody understands what anyone else is saying." Jiwoo closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had been to the Galactic Council many times and had seen how it worked. The massive chamber held representatives from over 1,000 different species. Some breathed air, some breathed methane, some lived in water tanks, some spoke with sounds, others used colors or smells or electrical fields. Human diplomats had spent centuries learning how to communicate with all of them. They had developed universal translators and cultural guides. They had trained their entire lives to understand the subtle differences between species. They knew that when a Caltharian spoke loudly, it meant respect, not anger. They knew that when an Epsilon Collective member was silent. It meant they were thinking, not being rude without humans to translate and mediate. The different species were misunderstanding each other in dangerous ways. A Caltharian war cry was being interpreted as a threat. A epsilon collective calculation was being seen as an insult. A crystalline hegemony formation pattern was being viewed as an attack formation. The galaxy was like a giant conversation between thousands of different voices, and suddenly the translators had all disappeared. At once Engineer Daeho Yoon came running onto the bridge with oil stains on his uniform. "Commander, our communication array is working perfectly. The problem is not with our equipment. The problem is that nobody is talking on the other end. I have checked every frequency, every channel, every backup system. Nothing is coming from human space." Juwo walked over to the main viewing screen and stared out at the stars. She could see the distant glow of the Andromeda Nebula, where the first human colony had been built 50 years ago. She could see the trade routes that connected human worlds to alien civilizations. She could see the defensive stations that protected the borders of human space, but she could not hear any voices from any of them. Pilot Chaewon Shin looked up from her controls. "Commander, I have been monitoring the situation, and it is getting worse every hour that passes. More conflicts are starting. The Void Hunters are raiding trade ships. The Plasma Consortium is claiming mining rights that belong to other species. The entire galactic economy is falling apart." Jiwoo knew that Chaewon was right. The galactic economy depended on trust and communication. Human merchants had built relationships with alien traders over many generations. They had negotiated contracts and trade agreements that kept goods flowing between worlds. They had created a system of credit and exchange that allowed different species to trade with each other even when they had very different values and needs. Without human merchants to maintain these relationships, the system was breaking down. Species were defaulting on contracts because they could not communicate with their partners. Trade routes were being abandoned because nobody could negotiate safe passage through different territories. The Harmony was the only human ship still transmitting, and only because they had been exploring empty space. When whatever happened to humanity had occurred, they had been so far from civilization that they had missed the disaster. Complitelli Ju made a decision that would change everything. "Set course for the Terra system," she ordered. "We need to find out what happened to our people before this galaxy tears itself apart." As the Harmony turned toward Earth, the crew could see on their screens that the galaxy was already beginning to burn. Ancient enemies were remembering old grudges. Species that had been peaceful for centuries were preparing for war. The careful balance that humans had maintained for generations was crumbling like a house of cards behind them. Subspace communications were breaking down as alien species stopped trusting each other. The universal peace that humanity had worked so hard to create was disappearing, and in its place was rising the specter of the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen. The universe's chattiest species had gone silent, and the silence was about to destroy everything.